Susanna works full-time at the Christchurch City Council as a water engineering officer. She has served the Canterbury Branch as secretary before becoming branch president in October 2019. So please join me in welcoming Susanna.
Hello everyone. Okay, so transcending the boundaries. Throughout human history and across cultures, animals have lived alongside human beings. Food, fascination or fear, they featured in art and architecture and were intertwined within folklore. But it wasn't just the everyday human activity and involvement that animals were recorded as being part of. Ancient beliefs, along with artefacts, have revealed that the animal kingdom was very much a part of religious and spiritual traditions. Revered and worshipped, animal symbols and metaphors have appeared throughout the world's sacred and spiritual history. For one example, in ancient Egypt, animals were the heart of everyday life and religion. The belief was that certain animals were the embodiment of particular gods, and so these creatures were viewed as sacred. Most ancient Egyptian towns chose a particular god to worship, and this meant that the animal associated with that god was also viewed as sacred. These animals were given both power and respect. The earlier Egyptian periods depicted the gods in entirely animal form, whilst later periods showed the animal man as bimorphic representation of the god. So here we have Anubis as the full jackal, and there he is with the human body. So Anubis was the god of cemeteries, embalming, as well as protector of graves, firstly as a jackal, then as a jackal head with human body. Why a jackal? Well, jackals were associated with death as they were often seen lurking around cemeteries and would feast on the dead. By making Anubis the patron deity of jackals, the Egyptians hoped to protect the bodies from being devoured. Anubis was shown as a black jackal, as this colour symbolised good fortune and rebirth. And Anubis was a major part of the transition from life to death and then back to life again. Another animal famously sacred and beloved by ancient Egyptians was the domestic cat. The domestic cat was believed to be the living incarnation of the goddess Bastet or Bast. Bast was the goddess of fertility, joy, women's secrets, good luck and protection, the home and domesticity. Cats were treasured companions in the home and were mummified in their millions to be buried alongside their owners. When a family cat died, the family would shave their eyebrows as a mark of mourning. And it wasn't just the love the ancient Egyptians expressed towards animals, but it was many ancient Egyptian texts that talk about the love that the gods had for animals. So in this hymn we read, "Thou art the only one, the creator of all that is, from whose eye men came forth, from whose mouth the gods originated, who creates the herbs which the cattle live on, who creates that which the fish in the river live on, and the birds in the air, who gives breath to the chicken and the egg, who maintains the young of the snake, who creates the nourishment of the gnat, and also the worms and the fleas, who cares for the mice in their hole and keeps alive the insects in every tree." Looking after animals was an ethical duty for Egyptians, along the same lines as looking after the poor and the needy. And from another slice of ancient text, it says, "I have given bread to the hungry, water to the thirsty, clothing to the naked. I have given food to the ibis, the falcon, the cat, and the jackal." Other ancient cultures and societies that have sacred history bound with the animals they share their world with are the First Nation tribes of North America and the Pacific Northwest. They had a close spiritual association with the animals that shared their world. Their beliefs were based on animism, which embodies the spiritual idea that all natural objects within the universe have souls or spirits, not only in humans, but animals, plants, rocks, and natural phenomena, like waterfalls. Animals were considered brothers and sisters, four-legged, winged, and swimming family members that were part of the creation stories. They were messengers to the ancestors and the Creator. They were considered teachers and guides. The belief that animals, as spirit guides, walk through different stages of life with a person, teaching and guiding them, and in some instances, protecting them. Many Indigenous peoples believe that the animal people have spirits and enter the human world to give their bodies to supply men with food, fur, and other materials. After their flesh is used, the animals return home, put on new flesh, and re-enter the human world whenever they choose. Another ancient group I would like to compare are the ancient Norse and Germanic people. In the pre-Christian worldview and practices of the Norse and Germanic people, we find totemism. Totemism is a relationship of spiritual kinship between a human or group of humans and a particular species of animal or plant. The totem animal or plant is generally held to be an ancestor, a guardian, and or a benefactor of the human or humans in question. Totemism manifested in two especially prominent and powerful areas: the animal helping spirits, mostly known as Filger, and the patron animals of shamanic military societies. So Filger are guardian spirits attached to individuals and follow their chosen person throughout their life. They typically take the form of animals and occasionally a beautiful woman. Filger usually appear visible at the moment of the birth of that individual. So they're there ready to sort of attach in that realm. They appear in dreams and at moments of great crisis, most often immediately before an individual's death. Filger is Old Norse for follower, and they are said to reflect the character of the individual. If they were of tame character, they might say have a Filger of an ox or a goat. If they were a bit wild in nature, their Filger would be, say, a fox, a wolf, or an eagle. So it would be an animal that would, its nature, would be comparable to the person that they were attached to. Many of the Norse gods and goddesses had personal totem animals which may or may not be Filger. For example, Odin was particularly associated with ravens, wolves, and horses, Thor with goats, and Freya with wild boars. So it should come as no surprise then that the human devotees have personal totems of their own. I mentioned earlier the shamanic military societies, and one of the most prominent examples of group totemism is among the ancient Germanic people, that which occurs within the initiatory military society. And many of these societies had a totem animal, usually a wolf or a bear, who would lend their ferocity and strength to the warriors. Initiation into one of these societies involves spending a period of time alone in the wilderness, hunting, gathering, and surviving, living in imitation of the group's totem beast. And as an individual's training progressed, imitation gave way to identification. The warrior achieved a state of spiritual unification with the bear or the wolf, and the bond was displayed to others by the warrior dressing himself in a ritual costume made from the hide of the animal, which was an outward reminder of the man having gone beyond the confines of his humanity. The transformation was more than merely symbolic and fell somewhere between having the animal as one's Filger and possession to the extreme of shapeshifting. The sagas contain numerous accounts of elite warriors shapeshifting into a bear or a wolf. there's a story of two brothers who was said to have shapeshifted and completely take control of a whole big military camp of their enemy because they did their shapeshifting. Those who had bears as their totem animals were none other than the famous berserkers, which translates to bear shirts. There's a berserker who used to bite their shields and get in a bit of a wild state. For the ancient Norse, it wasn't just all about wolves and bears and battles. The Norse loved their pets, and they kept cats, dogs, birds, falcons, hawks, and even peacocks. It's hard to imagine a Viking chief taking his favourite cat or dog along on a raid, but that's exactly what they did. And ginger cats were prized for good luck on long sea voyages, though I'm sure the cat didn't feel the same. This is just delightful carving. Is known as the Osberg cat, and it's in Oslo. The poor old cat, I think he's had enough of this raiding duty. And a little more on Norse cats. They were the favourite animal of the fertility goddess Freya, also the goddess of love and luck. So there's a similarity here between the Egyptian goddess Baz. Freya's chariot was pulled by cats, specifically the skunk cat, which is also, as we know, as the Norwegian forest cat, which is larger and more powerful than most domestic cats. I don't know if anyone's ever seen a Norwegian forest cat, but they're fabulous creatures. According to the mythologist and scholar Jacob Grimm, when a bride goes to the wedding in fine weather, she has fed the cat well, which means she's not offended as a favourite of the love goddess. So now I'd like to move from ancient cultures and their spiritual association with the animal world to more modern day religions and look at how the major religions today view animals and where is their place in modern religious practice. Pope Francis recently staked out his position when he told a little boy whose dog had recently died that paradise is open to all of God's creatures. The Catholic Church affirms that saints have resurrected dead animals, such as the feats of St. Francis, St. Isidore of Spain, and St. Nicholas of Tolentino. Such a resurrection can only be possible if the soul survives physical death. The consensus among Christian denominations seems to be that animals do have souls, but they don't all agree on whether or not they are welcomed into heaven along with people. The Bible is riddled with passages where animals, as well as nature, praise God. You can find it in Psalms, Isaiah, and the book of Revelation, among many places. It suggests that all of God's creation are aware of God. I found this fascinating story in the book of Numbers. It's the story of Balaam's donkey. It demonstrates that animals are far more than soulless animated beings. Balaam is called the wicked prophet because though he knew God, he betrayed him. And Balaam is out riding his donkey when she, the donkey, sees an angel standing in the way. 3 times the donkey had to sidestep the angel, and each time Balaam hit her because he couldn't see the angel. Then Yahweh opened the mouth of the donkey, and she spoke to Balaam, and she asked him what she had done for him to hit her. Balaam answered that she'd made a mockery of him, and he said if he had a sword he would kill her. The donkey responds that Balaam has ridden her all his life and asked if she had ever acted that way before, and Balaam said no. Then Yahweh opened Balaam's eyes, and he was able to see the angel with a sword in his hand. Balaam bowed down and fell on his face. The angel asked why he struck the donkey 3 times. The angel proceeded to say that If she had not turned away, I would certainly have killed you by now, but I would have spared her. So note here that the donkey could see the angel without God opening her eyes, unlike Balaam. And this implies that animals, arguably because of their innocence, can see the spirit world all the time. Humans can only do so when God makes an exception, just as an exception for the donkey to speak in a human language. Most of all, it illustrates the ignorance of the human rather than the donkey. He wanted to kill the donkey only to find out that she had saved his life. The angel even specified that he would have killed Balaam had not the donkey avoided the angel. In other words, Yahweh defended the life of an animal before a human who was in the wrong. The soul endows the body with a personality, willpower and intelligence, and we can see all these traits in the donkey. Once this donkey could speak in the human tongue, she even reasoned with Balaam. We already know that animals communicate with each other and humans just via their own language. Also, animals did not transgress any commandment in the Garden of Eden, and consequently they were not punished and will not be subject to God's last judgment. Hence, paradise belongs to them. And if eating continues in heaven, Isaiah's prophecy indicates a return to vegetarianism the way it was in the Garden of Eden. And that was, before when animals were introduced. They were originally in the Garden of Eden. They were to keep Adam company, not to be food. Have a think about your own animals or animals that you might have seen and noticed. Sometimes if you've got a cat, you might see the cat sort of fixated on something up in the ceiling, twitching their tail or following something around up in the room. My own little dog at home, when my mother-in-law passed, for quite a while afterwards, he would, and he still does occasionally, jump down off our laps, run out into the other room, wag his tail, looking up, there's nothing there, he's looking up, wagging his tail, and then follows something out, still wagging his tail, and we can see his little head, and he's just watching, there's, someone moving around, so he can see something that we can't see, and he's obviously quite happy about whatever it is. Mormons have a very clear position, declaring that yes, of course, animals enter heaven, they have souls and are welcomed in paradise. In the Islamic faith, all souls are eternal, including those of animals. But in order to get to heaven, beings must be judged by God on Judgment Day. Some Muslim scholars say animals are not judged as humans are, others say they are. So it's unsettled exactly what happens to them in the thereafter. Buddhism. Animals have always been regarded in Buddhist thought as sentient beings. Furthermore, animals possess Buddha nature, according to the Mahayana school, and therefore potential for enlightenment. Moreover, their doctrine of rebirth held that any human could be reborn as animal, and any animal could be reborn as a human. Animals are important symbols in Buddhism. Some, like the lion, represent Buddha. The lion symbolises the attainment of enlightenment, while others, like elephant, horse, peacock, represent personality traits needed to reach enlightenment. Fish represent the element of water and the ability to navigate the vast sea of suffering to find enlightenment. Hinduism also outlines a type of reincarnation in which a being's eternal soul is reborn on a different plane after death, continuing until the soul is liberated. Animals have souls, but most Hindu scholars say that the animal souls evolve into the human plane during the reincarnation process. So yes, animals are part of the same life, death, rebirth cycle that humans are in, but at some point they cease to be animals and their souls enter human bodies so they can be closer to God. Judaism is rather fuzzy on whether or not heaven or hell exist. There are various places in Jewish texts that resemble that bear resemblance to heaven and hell, but they are difficult to pass out. So it should come as no surprise that Judaism is also unclear about whether animals can go to these places. Some rabbis say they do, and others say they do not. What is clear, however, is that animals do have souls in Judaism. Jews who keep kosher don't eat the blood of birds or mammals because that's where their souls are said to be kept. And kosher also means, like if you're buying kosher food, meat means the animal has been killed humanely. Not necessarily kept humanely, but killed humanely. The Torah instructs to be kind to animals and treat them with respect and consideration because they are creations of God. So how about here in New Zealand? From the earliest of inhabitants to the modern day, New Zealanders on a whole live pretty close to nature. We're never too far from the coast or the mountains or the rivers, bush and forest. The creatures that inhabit these realms are part of our identity. They are significant and most would recognise the link. The little fantail over there is right outside my kitchen window and comes to visit me most mornings, which is very cute when I'm having breakfast. The national parks and wild spaces teem with the life force of birds and the very trees themselves. The oceans contain treasures of dolphin species, whales, orcas, rays and fish life. Spend any time alone in these wild spaces and the life force is palpable. Back in mid-80s in Golden Bay, late one afternoon at Onekaka Beach, I was swimming with a friend and we were out about up to here, and we saw a fin and we thought, ooh. Initially you think, shark, but it turned out no, it's the wrong shape and it's a dolphin. We're like, oh wow, look, it's a dolphin. Just on its own, and it swam closer and closer and we were like, oh, so nervous and excited. And it just was like coming closer and closer and then it came right up to me, and because my head was like right up just above the water, this dolphin, wild dolphin, came up, stopped, tipped on its side, and this amazingly beautiful eye looked up at me and looked straight into my face, and I'm like looking at this eye. Oh my God, the dolphin's looking at me. And it was just incredible. And then so I thought, ooh. So I reached out, see if it would let me touch it. Let me touch it. Ooh. So I rubbed it under its flipper and it gave a little wiggle, so I assumed it was ticklish. So the weeks, and then I went over to visit my friend Heidi. She was standing on tippy-toe on another rock. She was shorter than me, and let her touch it as well. And then it came back, and then I thought, oh, I wonder if I can give it a hang on to it. And it let me hang on to it. This wild dolphin. Put my arms around it, and then off it swam and took me for a ride. And took me back to where it had picked me up from, and then went over to Heidi and did the same to her. It was just, honestly, from that moment, had a profound shift in just everything. I just felt it was quite overwhelming, and you know, I get a bit emotional thinking about it now, but it was just a huge shift in my awareness, and I felt very privileged for that. So where am I up to? Yes. We're familiar with the fantails also. They're a sweet little companion on a bush trail, but when they come flying into your house, now that's something else entirely. A moorpork's or ruru's call at night has a mysterious and otherworldly air. In Maori tradition, the moorpork was seen as a watchful guardian, and it belonged to the spirit world, as it is a bird of the night. So let's have a closer look at one small tribe in the far north, Ngāti Wai, whose land stretches from the Whangarei Harbour up to the east coast of Coromandel, and the main settlement being Whangaruru. A study was done back in 1963 by Eric Schwimmer, who spent time with about 17 different households, and during the interviews, only 6 animal guardians were reported. There were 2 sharks, a stingray, a moorpork, a shag, and a dog. These guardians were recognised by special markings which distinguished them from others of their species, and by their behaviour, which was free from fear of man. They would come very close and utter unusual cries. There was no ritual to summon these guardians. They would just come of themselves. Their appearance always had a specific and important meaning for those who saw them. Killing the guardians is thought to be impossible. For instance, Tautahi, the shark, identified by his markings, appeared in the harbour in the summer of 1960-61. The holiday makers from out of town tried to kill him from their launches while the locals watched excitedly from the shore. To their amusement, the shark managed to evade his pursuers every time, confirming he was immortal. The animals fall into 2 categories according to their sex. The male guardians, which is the shark, the stingray, the shag and the dog, all belong to edible diurnal species, though they provide members of their hapu with certain forms of protection, warning, help or advice. They also have the capacity to kill offenders, whether they are members of the hapu or not. Interesting to note, there is nothing fearful about ordinary members of their species to which these guardians belong. The tapu individual stands apart from the others, which are regarded without any special respect. And the other category is Haneruru, a female spirit embodied in a moorpork. She belongs to a nocturnal species, never eaten and generally regarded with some fear, as like to contain ghosts and bring evil. Haneruru can protect, warn, help and advise, but she cannot kill. The worst punishment she can inflict is to withdraw her support. Here is too a difference in the kind of messages she imparts. The male guardians are concerned with everyday life, getting lost at sea or in the bush. Haneruru, however, is a messenger from the world of death, for it is when she who appears when people are dying or when visitors are arriving, which in Maori symbolism is a kind of return. Now, Theosophy. What is the theosophical viewpoint on animals' spiritual life and soul? Theosophical literature affirms the existence of souls in animals. HPB states they reincarnate almost immediately into a higher animal organism after death. Annie Besant, who referred to animals as our younger brothers and sisters, and Charles Ledbetter state that the souls of animals are not individualised as those of human beings. They have group souls. That is a certain group of animals that just share one soul. The individual experiences of each animal contribute to the collective, instinctive or intelligence of that species. The group soul of animals may start with a large body of animals, gradually splitting up into smaller groups until an animal soul may just be using one particular animal body. And in the latter case, the animal is now nearing individualisation, that is, getting ready to enter human evolution. Charles Ledbetter imagined the astral life in animals in his book, The Inner Life. When an individualised animal dies, he has a happy astral life of considerable length during which he remains in his earthly home and in all the closest touch with his special friend and protector. During all this time, he is in a state equivalent to that of human being in the heaven world, though at a somewhat lower level. Charles Ledbetter also went on to explain, a man who has really made friends with an animal is often much helped and strengthened by the affection lavished upon him. When the cat or dog develop a really great affection, it fills the whole of that animal's life and therefore keeps a steady stream of force always playing upon its object, which is us. A factor whose value is by no means to be ignored. The view about shared soul of animals appears to find confirmation in the researches of British biologist Rupert Sheldrake, who proposed the theory of morphic resonance, where animals can transmit learning across space through a shared substratum of consciousness. Been some really interesting studies done. Thus, when a group of rats, for example, learned to solve a particular maze, it took them a number of hours. The rats of the same had to be the same species in another place or continent will learn to solve the same maze in a much shorter period, implying that the latter rats learned from the former through non-physical connections. In The Group Soul, James S. Perkins has written, animal consciousness is not only evolved through individual forms, but also by group experience and growth. The group soul is an admirable conveyance for sharing the collective experience of a number of animals. So this illustration shows a number of lions linked together in a single sphere of consciousness. Through the common shelter of this immortal soul group, there is a constant stimulation of consciousness in all the creatures attached to this group. The sheltering feature of soul group existence indicates that the animal is not aware of aloneness. In this illustration, the star monad above it is radiating its influence into the sphere through the medium of an angelic presence that represents the immortal group soul intelligence. The entity is visualized gathering the essential quality of each member's experiences and redistributing to the whole group. There is a common influx of spiritual forces from above, in addition to the flow of impacts from the environmental experiences pouring into the group soul. Together, these unfold the lion's characteristic natures and action. There is individual progress in the soul group. For example, a domestic animal in a group soul, due to human association, advances more rapidly than others of his type that remain in the wild kingdom. When this individual progress occurs, the group soul may be reduced in number, thus the animal unit of consciousness gradually approaches entry into the human kingdom. Groups of animal species, elephants for example, can exhibit behaviour and qualities that you would think surely lend themselves to an animal close to individualisation. There's an example of behaviour that was witnessed where a group of wild elephants were working together to save a baby rhinoceros that was stuck in a mud waterhole, and the rhino's mother were like terrified and like all up agitated and were charging at the elephants, not realising that the elephants were actually trying to save their baby. The elephants continued and put up with the rampaging rhino mothers, and they worked together and they saved the baby rhino that pulled it out would have otherwise died. So it's pretty extraordinary that one species is going through quite a bit of agitation to save another species young. It shows intelligence, empathy and determination. The group soul of the beehive, for instance, is a fascinating thing, and I learned about this through keeping my own bees, that the nature of the queen of the hive is reflected in the bees. So if you've got a very gentle queen, the bees are very tame and very calm, and you can work closely around the hive, and I can do my weeding, and I'll occasionally have one come and go, like, who are you, what are you doing here, kind of thing. You're a bit close, but never sting. But if you've got a queen that tends to be aggressive, the bees will be very aggressive. So it's quite interesting phenomenon. And I was talking to a beekeeper who has a stall at the Canterbury A&P show every year. And he told me how much he loves his bees, like he absolutely loves his bees. And he said, the bees know I love them. He said they can tell. He said, I've never had to wear protective clothing and I've never been stung. They just know. Which I was pretty impressed. This is a sweet little picture. I don't know if you can read that. So the owner wrote, he guarded a bird with an injured wing under my truck for 4 days before it could fly off. I had to bring them both food and water because he refused to leave its side day and night. Very proud of him. Isn't that sweet? So that's another example of another species looking after, recognising another species was in trouble and protecting. Beautiful. Okay, I just want to share a little story about a little orphan lamb that I took into my home. It was just by chance, which of course is nothing's ever just by chance, that this person was given my number. So the lamb, this is down in the bottom corner there, that's when I first got her. She was, well, she's probably a little bit older there, but she was just 3 days old. And she was the orphan lamb. Her mother was a pet sheep. And the owners of this lifestyle block that had this pet sheep as well as a normal sheep out in the paddock, they were due to go away on a big overseas trip. And the mother sheep had died, and they were like frantic trying to find, you know, a foster carer for the wee lamb. And I happened to be working from home at that point, so I said yes. She quickly became a member of our family, spending, because it was the middle of winter, it was freezing, spending her time inside with me, helped along with disposable nappies with a hole cut for her tail. She took it upon herself to jump up onto my daughter's bed at night and curled up like a little cat to enjoy bedtime stories, something that she would not be deterred from, so she was determined to join in with that. And later, curling up on my lap while I was having a cup of tea, and I could hear her coming. I could hear her coming. There she is. I could hear her coming, and it would be like brum, brum, brum. I thought, oh, and I'd get my cup of tea out of the way, and she would land, flying through the air, and land on my lap, and curl up, go to sleep. So, yeah, she had a great personality, and so I ended up taking her across the road to the primary school. And introducing all the children over there and giving them turns at feeding a lamb. She spent time at the play centre just around the road as well, and she was very happy with the kids, and they could maul her and do whatever, and she was very happy. She went back to the farm that she had originally come from, and the farmer promised that she would never end up in the freezer because they wanted to have another pet sheep. So yeah, this one was, they were very grateful. The farmer rang me a few days later to tell me he had seen the most amazing sight. A terrible storm had started early one evening, and he'd gone out to check on all the newborn lambs in the paddocks, and he couldn't believe his eyes. There was, my mammy she'd only been at the farm 3 days, and there she was leading all the mother sheep and their newborn lambs into the barn. Oh. And sheep don't do that. If anyone knows about sheep, they don't do that. They just hunker down in the weather. They might try and find a bush, but generally they don't. So he had never seen anything like it. So I put this down to the fact that she had all that sort of nurturing and love from a human family, and also she herself had been an offspring of a loved pet. So I sort of think that, you know, maybe that human contact, like even when she was in the womb, her mother had, you know, all that trust of human and all that sort of passed through. So she was quite an exceptional chick. So here we go. Here's an animal that you will all know that reached a level of individualisation. This is Coco. The beautiful creature exhibited intelligence, and emotion, empathy, acts of kindness, not to mention a sense of humour, and cognitive thought, as she referred to death in her sign language as the dark sleep. And she grieved terribly when her cat died. So there was an extraordinary event that happened in South Africa when conservationist and elephant whisperer Lawrence Anthony passed away in March 2012. At the moment of his death, 2 herds of wild elephants he had saved from extermination and then rehabilitated into his reserve at Thula Thula started a long trek right across the park, and it took them 12 hours. They then stood together for 24 hours outside Lawrence's home. And because of satellite footage, they could see that the moment the elephants turned and began their trek towards his home was the moment of his death. So this is the morphic resonance thing sort of coming into play again, which is quite fascinating. How did the elephants know their trusted friend had died? Well, these 2 elephant herds joined together every year and appear at Lawrence's home on the anniversary of his death, which is it's just incredible. Cross-species connectedness offer us a unique opportunity to transcend the boundaries of our human perspective. Relationships with animals allow us to stretch our consciousness towards understanding what it's like to be different. How can we possibly move towards being more spiritual beings if we cannot see beyond our own species? How can we come to grasp the interconnectedness of all life if we limit ourselves to only knowing our own kind? Any spiritual tradition teaches us to open our hearts, open our minds. And this is what we do instinctively when we form close attachments to members of the animal kingdom. A bond is created where sharing the same language is not required. There is most definitely a spiritual dimension to the bond we share with our companion animals. It is the animal companion that exhibits the intense ideals that we hold dear in the human world. Love, loyalty, courage, faithfulness, companionship. That another species would impart such qualities upon us not only touches our hearts, it reminds us how important these qualities are amongst members of our own kind, among our own human relationships. I don't know if anyone's been to Edinburgh and seen the little grey friars Bobby. The little Skye Terrier, whose love and loyalty to his deceased owner moved the hearts of 19th century Edinburgh, guarding his owner's grave for 14 years, for God's sake. And when we were there, it was quite amazing actually. There were people from all across the world. He'd gone there to find little Bobby's statue. There were like Japanese tourists, little girls, all like, like so thrilled to be there, and all sorts of people recognise the qualities in Grey Friars Bobby. And you can see people have put like little sticks, you know, a little dog, like some sticks to play, by his, and on the tombstone, it's a little hard to read, it says, "Let his loyalty and devotion be a lesson to us all." Hachi, or Hachiko, the loyal Akita, who faithfully waited at the Japanese train station for 9 years for his deceased master to return home until his death. So his loyalty and faithfulness was recognised, as you can see here. In rural France, a pet bull jumps the farm gate to find his deceased farmer. This was in the press quite a few years ago, a couple of decades ago, but I never forgot the story. I'll move on from that sad image. So he was a pet bull in rural France, and his farmer had died, and the bull jumps the gate, and their friendship was such that the bull was not to be parted. The bull was found lying by the fresh grave at the cemetery, and he would not be moved. How did the bull know where to find him? He'd never been out of the farm. Was this an example of the bull, like Balaam's donkey, being able to see the spirit beings? Could the bull see his deceased farmer friend? There is mutual enrichment of each soul in this relationship. The human benefits from the moral development, the enhanced compassion to the other species, and unspoken understanding of the kinship among all life, psychological well-being, and the heightening of the capacity to love and to experience joy. It is this heightening of the capacity to love and the opening of our hearts to another that is the greatest gift we can receive. This will really get you going. Before I finish, I'd like to play just two really short videos. You may know about Peo, the French horse. He was an eventing horse around the Calais area, and his owner Hassan noticed that Peo would, after his eventing, would gravitate towards the crowd, and particularly people who were quite elderly or infirmed or not well. So he noticed this, and this was becoming more and more of a thing with his horse. So he thought, they then trialled him as a therapy horse. Before I finish, I'd like to just read a prayer written by Albert Schweitzer, who was an amazing man, humanitarian, Nobel Peace Prize winner. And I also have some copies if anyone wants a copy up on the table here. Hear our humble prayer, O God, for our friends, the animals, especially for animals who are suffering, for any that are hunted or lost, or deserted, or frightened, or hungry, for all that must be put to death. We entreat for them all thy mercy and pity, and for those who deal with them we ask a heart of compassion, gentle hands, and kindly words. Make us ourselves to be true friends to animals, and so to share the blessing of the merciful. Thank you.